Yes, it's Cyrus Says, or some version of it. We've lost interest in the program, but we never lose interest in our guests who will come up in a few seconds. I, of course, have investigated in the night while you guys are doing nothing, watching Netflix and the like, or some Legends cricket match. I, of course, spend my time trying to understand the futility of a law, which tells me when I come from certain states in India or 14 countries outside India back to Mumbai, I have to produce certificates and COVID test results and things like that. But if I travel from land, as in I come in by train or I come by car, I don't. So what the authorities are telling us is if you go from Ahmedabad to Mumbai by plane, please show us a test in the last 72 hours to show you're COVID negative. But if you come by train or by car or by bike or whatever, no problem, it's fine. So COVID can only be given through high air areas where basically planes fly and you can't get it on normal terrestrial sort of situation. This is an eye opener for me. So everybody don't worry. If you're in a train, if you're just walking, if you're going by a handcart or whatever, you're fine. Just don't take a plane. All the COVID is possible only through plane transfer. That's my point for the day. And now let's, well, I know her name, so I'm not referring to it. I'm just trying to open the research because, as usual, our guests are super guests and they have millions and millions of achievements. And my first thing is to clarify, as I usually do with names, Hamsini Hariharan is not part of Colonial Cousins. Okay, that's Hariharan, okay, with Les Lewis, but she's got that all her life and she hates the reference, although we all love Colonial Cousins. Now that's out of the way. So let's welcome Hamsini Hariharan, host of States of Anarchy. Now, this is a very important podcast because she basically is, she's corrected me offline, a pseudophile, which means a study and perhaps partially favorable study of a culture, the culture of China in this case. And I'm going to find out more about this the podcast, of course. But basically, she's almost a card-carrying member of the Politburo of China and possibly is very close to the big man himself, Li Jinping. And just to mention to Doordarshan newscasters, it's not 11 Jinping, it's Li. It's
she.
It's with a Zhe, right?
She, yeah.
Oh, it's
Xi
with the
Jinping.
S.
It's X, so it's Xi Jinping.
So how do we pronounce it through the English phonetic?
She, like SHE, she.
SHE, she.
Yeah.
So the world's most powerful leader, bar none, is called she. Okay. We start on a very positive note, Miss Hariharanji. Excellent. Okay, now listen, let me introduce you first from the podcast point of view, and then we'll look at your life, obviously. So what is this podcast all about? And is the political climate right to do a podcast which perhaps is, I would say, neutral to China, where here the jingoism is such that you have to attack China to be credible. So from that point of view, tell us about States of Anarchy.
Okay. To clarify, I am not pro-China. I am trying to be neutral and objective
That's
in
what I said.
my research.
That's what I said. I said neutral.
So
But
States of
neutral is
Anarchy.
perceived as pro sometimes. That's why.
Yeah, that's true. Neutral is perceived as pro. States of Anarchy is not only about China. It's a podcast on global affairs and foreign policy. And the idea is that you have all of these things that happen on the international stage that affect like you and me as people. And we have no clue how that happens.
Will you cover your ears for 1 second? I need to shout. Yeah.
Okay.
Silvery, you bloody idiot. You told me it's all about China. She's a political spokesperson for the world. She's an international sort of human. She's looking at global politics and not just China. I had to tell him. Okay, he didn't understand but once you listen to the podcast, you'll obviously understand more about what you're saying. But you are an expert on Chinese politics.
Yes.
So we're not fully wrong.
No, you're mostly correct.
Fully wrong sounds like a Chinese name. Is that okay to say? I am fully wrong. That's wrong.
No.
That's not right. That's right.
But yeah. So the podcast is, we do a lot of episodes on China because that's where my networks are at. That's what my interest is in. But yeah, the idea is to break down like topics in global affairs and foreign policy and talk about things that make it easier. Because it's a very fancy subject in that sense, but it's also a lot of fun.
What do you mean fancy subject? It's a subject of the hour. We accept that you're an international foreign relations sort of student, no doubt about that. And perhaps everyone is who's in this field, but there's no doubt that you've taken on perhaps the most interesting country of this generation. And this is not because of the COVID, which is part of what they've done. But, it's the fastest growing economy. It's changed the business of the world in the last 10 years. And whatever you say about them, their success, at least from the outside, seems to be, even when it comes to COVID, they seem to be coping with it better most of the time than the rest of the world. So first, I'm going to ask you now, we can go back a little bit. Why would you as a young lady, why did China come onto your horizon? How and why?
Okay, so I think...
and you're still a young lady.
Yes, I am still a young lady. Thank you. I feel very old in my head, but that's a different thing. I think when I was very young, I knew I wanted to work in like international affairs, and but I didn't know how. Like my dream when I was 8 was to be Kofi Annan, and my parents were like,
Wow.
"Please write the IFS, do this." But I'm really
Hey,
lazy
sorry,
also.
interrupt. What's the background then? An 8-year-old wanting to be Kofi Annan. I mean, I do remember eight, and I mean, maybe I want to be Viv Richards or something, but the ladies around me also, I'm trying to remember nobody wanted to be Kofi Annan. Forget the gender cross. Your parents were in the foreign relations
No,
business,
that's the thing. Everyone
IFS.
asks me if like I like this. I'm first generation in the field in that sense. I have no family connections. No one's been in the civil services. No one's worked on anything
But Hamsini,
academic.
why would you know about Kofi Annan in a way where you idolize him at 8?
I was a really boring kid who read a lot of books. That's basically it, I think. Yeah, so that was why I wanted to be Kofi Annan at 8. And then I sort of continued with it. I did journalism, I studied international relations, and I realized that China is a country that most Indians know nothing about. If you say, okay, tell me what you think about China, you'd think Szechuan noodles, Bruce Lee, large economy,
Jet Li, Lin Dan, greatest of all time.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So and that's where the knowledge sort of stops, right?
yeah.
And this is even within like the international relations field. Not a lot of people know anything about
One more
China.
thing, don't buy Chinese products. I've been
Don't buy
told.
Chinese products,
Ah, right,
guys.
right.
Always buy
But
Atmanirbhar.
but we can buy Indian products with Chinese products in them, so that's allowed.
Yeah, look, it's completely like futile to try to separate ourselves from Chinese products. It's just I don't think it's possible right now. But yeah, so I just thought that China was this really interesting country that I knew absolutely nothing of, and so I started like reading more about it. I started learning the language, which is very difficult, as I'm sure you're
Hold on a
aware.
second. Exactly that. It's for you. I would understand that because you're raised with English education. Some of the European
Mhm.
languages come naturally to people who are good with linguistic thing. Devanagari, so you can do the Indian languages. But this is completely like, I mean, when you start, you're zero. Am I right? You're zero.
Yeah, you are zero.
And
Like
there
I
are much
think
more alphabets in Mandarin and Cantonese.
so. I mean, they have like building blocks, and like every character, in a sense, every word is a character. And so after a point, you're just like mixing and matching different characters to sort of like build blocks of words. So it's a lot of fun, but it's also
So the very
very
language
difficult.
needs you to be a little athletic intellectually, in a sense.
Yeah. So, for example, right, you can say like the word ma, like 4 different times because every word has 4 tones, right? So, if you say like mama, it means mother. But if you say ma, it means horse. So,
So your mother and a horse can be mistaken for each other, which
yes.
amongst the Parsis does happen from time to time. With due apologies. Yes. So
Yeah.
ma and ma. What was the inference difference? I didn't get it.
So one is like a high tone, like you're singing, like ah. The other like falls. So there are, look, I
Ma.
do it. Yeah, I
Can
do
you
a
do it?
terrible job at explaining this also because my
But
Mandarin is the
can you
best.
do the practical usage? Then maybe we can understand.
Sure. Okay. So actually, we use tones in everything, right? So
You're
suppose
saying we, huh? The
we do.
Indian government is listening.
So
Woo!
suppose I'm saying the word dude, right? So if
Hmm.
I'm like, dude, right? Like I'm really happy, so I'm singing it. But if I'm very pissed off and I go, dude, right? So there's like an inflection. Or
Correct.
if I'm very tired, I'm like, dude, like why? So the same thing happens with every single word in
What are
Chinese.
you saying?
Yeah. So it's a little difficult.
So if you're deaf and dumb, with due respect, it'll be really tough. How do you get the inflection?
I have no clue, honestly, how
How do
like
you translate?
people
So
who are,
many mistakes in diplomacy is because the people are, have a sense issue. That's what I think.
yeah. Also, I think like on a practical level, most people don't read Chinese in this country. So if they want knowledge, they just depend on like American sources or European sources, which are great. But it just means that like India doesn't have any frameworks to understand China.
But there's this whole theory that Xi Jinping has pushed education, that is Chinese education, across the world. And then in all pockets of the world, especially the known world that we relate to, there's
Mhm.
always going to be Chinese schools as they push their culture. Is that just jingoism again and fear of red
I think
China?
I think it's not just like she. I think like there's been an expansion in teaching Chinese, but I think there's also a real demand for it. Like within India, when I started studying Chinese, there were like 2 schools where you could study, and now you have this whole host of places that are teaching not only English to Chinese, but like Hindi to Chinese or Tamil to Chinese, right? So there
Wow.
is a demand for it, even in India, because I think we know like what's profitable, like irrespective of which class you come from or background you come from.
Wow, it makes sense actually because China is so dominant that how would you hinder your prospects to get a job to actually be able to speak Mandarin, or which is the more universal language, Mandarin?
Mandarin, yeah. So you
Yeah.
have like standard Mandarin. They don't call like the local languages dialects, but if you go there, it's as different as like Kannada, Tamil, or
Are you kidding? Serious?
yeah, because you can't like everyone will to an extent speak Mandarin, but like it will really like the accent will change, the language changes, so that is can get difficult.
So what do you speak? What did you learn finally?
So I'm learning Mandarin, like standard Mandarin, because it's like all the so everyone
But
writes in standard Mandarin. The written is the same across, but the speaking changes.
so sorry, so you were in college and then you started taking these courses. How did you
Mhm.
land up at the University of Peking? Is it?
Yeah. So Peking University. So I worked for a couple of years in India in think tanks, and I was just
What is a think
researching.
tank? I looked at your research and I thought it sounded like clothes. Oh, check out my think tank. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
A think tank is like this fancy research organization where people like think big ideas and like ideate and provide policy recommendations and things. So
But why would they give it
essentially,
an obvious title? It's like calling a skinny guy skinny. I always find that very boring and unimaginative. Yeah.
yeah, that's true. I haven't
They
honestly
should
thought
think
of that
about that
before.
when they do the think tank. Let's call it Arthur. That makes sense. It's so bizarre. Then I'd be interested.
I work at an author.
So you work in an Arthur, but obviously your intellectual capacity being what it is, you wanted
Mhm.
more. This wasn't enough for you. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I figured that like you can't really do research on China if you're sitting in Bangalore all your life, right? Like, how much will
in
you
Delhi,
do?
definitely not.
Delhi, definitely not.
It's
And
barred.
most people in India do this. Like, they don't go to China, like, they don't learn the language. They just like read things online and are able to do research. And I just think like we owe ourselves better policy than doing that. So I really wanted to go to China. And then I got the scholarship to go there to sort of like study and work in China for 2 years.
This is in Beijing.
This is in Beijing. So this
So
is at
Peking
Peking
is the
University.
old English name or whatever, right?
Yeah. So Peking, Beijing is the same thing.
But
It
why do
used to
they
be.
keep the Peking? I thought they have the same name thing that we have of renaming and removing the imperialism.
Yeah. So Peking was technically like, it used to be, I guess it's like an imperialist thing where how they used to call Chennai Madras, right? Like some
Correct.
people still call it Madras, it's fine. So the university is still called
Only you
Peking.
damn rams and me. Everybody else is Chennai. Then
Yeah. So I went to Peking University and it was great. But the problem was after 6 months, the pandemic struck.
ah,
So I had to leave all of my stuff. I came back with like a 2 week suitcase because I assumed I was going to go back by like February last year. And it is now March 21. So I am still in India.
but you are doing your classes online, obviously, no?
So classes are all done. I'm finishing my thesis today. Um,
Wow.
yeah.
So you're going to be a doctor.
No. So the doctorship is the next stage. So this I'm
Okay.
doing my second master's.
Why would you do a second master's? It sounds like a Bawa again. My name is Master. They
I
have a
think
few like that. Yeah.
I think from now on that's going to be my new Twitter bio, Master Hamsini.
Master. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just felt like I was very unprepared to work on China or to do a PhD, to be honest. I felt like I didn't know anything. And that hasn't changed, to be honest.
See, we're
But
being funny here, Hamsini and or whatever, joking about it. But
Mhm.
obviously, you can't research a subject, live a subject, go to that country without really sort of enjoying it. It's just I don't think it's possible for anyone. I mean, whatever you say about a scientist studying molecular cellular development or whatever, the guy has to have some passion about it. So obviously, you really. And I'm saying this not in
Mhm.
a way that the government should interfere and revoke your passport, but you do enjoy Chinese culture because we only get one side about China. So maybe you
Yeah.
could help us hear the better side of China.
Sure. I think what a lot of people in India don't know is that Indians and Chinese are extremely alike. Like we have the same types of parents who push us to do things that
Oh,
we
I
don't
thought you
want
meant
to.
corruption. I was so disappointed. Yeah.
That too.
The
But
tiger mom. There's a
the
whole
tiger
thing in that.
mom,
Yeah.
definitely. And since it's like Women's Day week,
Yeah.
one of the things that China does really well is get a lot of women in the workforce. So like compared to ours, they have, I think, like 60-70% of women in the workforce. So you
Is
see
that
women doing
real? Is
anything.
that true?
Yeah, you see women like on trains, in ticket booths, doing all the service things that
So
you'd
in
see
government
men
jobs,
for.
more than 50% are with women.
Not just government jobs, all jobs.
I thought all jobs are government jobs in China. Please correct
No.
us. We don't know. This is a dark continent for us.
No, all jobs are not government jobs in China. Now, like since the 1980s, you have a lot more like private enterprise. So you have like a lot of private companies. So all jobs are not government jobs.
So what about these myths? Are they myths of people who I hear stories about from
Mhm.
people who've gone there for short time, saying that they're not very friendly and all that?
Mhm.
Could it just be the language thing? Is it true? Is it untrue? You would probably give us a proper answer because you actually live the life there, not a weekend.
Yeah, I think you have the whole gamut of people. And there were a lot of people who were very friendly, particularly if I was wearing something like colorful, and I'm Indian, so I always wear something colorful.
So you talk about Chinese men who find you attractive. Let's leave them aside. Let's talk about general public
No,
because
I'm
that's
talking
just
about like
men misbehaving. Girl from another culture, yummy, yummy. We don't want to hear about that. We want to hear about.
actually, I've never like one of the best things that I absolutely loved about China, and this is not just me. I spoke to like women from all over the world, and I'd never felt safer in my life. Like I could walk down the street at 2 a.m., go to my grocery store without looking up from my
So they
phone.
don't like women. No, I'm
They
just
don't
kidding. I'm
care.
kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah, because this is not Gurgaon where I grew up. Huh?
Yeah, so this
Yeah.
is exactly, and it was very like new for me because I was so used to like constantly being spatially aware in India, which I
Correct.
still am. And over there it was nice to just like not care for a bit about like people not watching you. So
But you were
that's
saying, what do
really
we have in
nice.
common? This is what we have not in common.
Not in common. What do we have in common? So oh, this is a really funny thing that I always enjoy like thinking about. But you know how we have like classified sections in for matrimony in India, right? In China they do this thing called marriage markets, where like you take your kid's bio, you put it on an umbrella, and then you take the umbrella to a park, and you sit there with lots of other parents who are doing the same, and
But is
they'll
it
be like,
raining?
no, it's just a marriage market. So you can
Raining
go
men.
there, you can look at this boy's bio or girl's bio, scan their WeChat QR code, and then get in touch with them.
So why use
Um,
the umbrella? Why not just go online?
I have no clue. I think umbrellas because they're like temporary installations.
But there must be something behind that. That's really so. It's all. Do they want to see who the parent or representative is? Is that part of it?
Yeah, I think like the parents are just like saying, "Oh, look, here is my kid. Please marry him or her." But
Which is more
yeah,
looking like you're searching for an NGO. Here's my kid, desolate, unkempt, no education, useless. But please, but is it a bit like us? Is there a class or caste system which is strong?
not a caste system, but definitely I think something that works into a huge part of their lives is this thing called the Hukou system.
The
A
what
lot of
system?
a Hukou system,
Hukou.
Hukou,
Okay.
Hukou. So it means it's basically like if I am from Beijing, then I have like a residence permit in Beijing. So for me to go to another city would be really difficult. Um,
Why?
because all your social services and education are still provided by the government, right? So if you're from Beijing, that's not an issue. But if you're from like a tiny village, like then to go to a city to get like good college education, to get good high school education, to get health services, all of that is very difficult. So a lot of people say, oh, we want someone with a Beijing hukou, we want someone with a Shanghai hukou, and not anything else.
So Hukou becomes FOMO in our language, fear of missing out, basically. You,
Yes, but it's also like a real document. It's like me saying, people who have apartments in Bombay are only allowed to apply to be my lawfully wedded husband. Um,
oh, we have something similar. Only one community is allowed in this building. X community is not allowed in this building. I can't take names because civil war will start. But so
yeah,
so we do have, but ours is unwritten tradition and
yeah,
convention, which
yeah.
is perhaps wrong, is wrong. But here you're saying it's the bureaucracy rules in such a way that it's just very clear, and nobody tries to buck the trend. Nobody tries any musty.
So now more than ever, like people are moving across and it's become easier, but it's still very restrictive. Like, so moving across cities, unless you're super rich, would be difficult, or unless you're migrant labor, in which case you're living under the radar, and yeah, you're away from the eye of the government.
Okay, can I ask you another question, which is a
Mhm.
little outside your waste of time asking you because you've got so much more to offer. But I'm just thinking about the people that I know who traveled to China, and we actually
Mhm.
had an event which got cancelled in Beijing. I was so excited to go, but it didn't happen. Um, what if you're Indian and vegetarian? I presume you're vegetarian and Indian. Then isn't that a problem? Because I've had a couple of people saying it was a huge nightmare. Again, only there for a project for 3 or 4 days.
Honestly, I was so scared that when I first went to China, I was like, oh God, I'm going to get nothing to eat. So very Indianish. I got like mixes and powders and things like that. Right. And I went there and I was blown away with the variety of things that I got as a vegetarian, Cyrus. Like really, like I'm not too picky about like some things like fish sauce or eggs or whatever. But
Hmm.
I had friends who were vegan and they managed really well. And this is not just me eating like one thing every single day. I had like a variety of shit that I could eat
But if
every
you went
single
to
day.
a normal restaurant, middle line restaurant, you could eat
Mhm.
in peace, or you would have somebody will have to help you. And
You'll have to. So the problem is all the menus are mostly in Chinese. So you'll
oh,
have to know what to order. But if you can figure that out and you tell them that you don't eat meat or fish or whatever and you eat only vegetarian stuff, like they'll be able to make it for you. Like that's always been my case. I went backpacking a couple of times last year and it was very easy for me to get food like in rural areas.
so Google Translate is important, is what you're saying, wherever you go.
Yes, or WeChat Translate, though we
Exactly,
banned
because
that.
you're not the norm. You've gone and studied the language. I'm talking about if we land up there for 3 or 4 days. People
But
should know.
honestly, my like language wasn't even when I went. Like I did very basic Mandarin when I went, and it was only after I lived there and I did like intensive Mandarin that it's gotten slightly better now. I'm not going to say it's great.
No, I'm sure it's fantastic, and we'll never know. But what am I going to say? We only have this racist sense of Chinese language where everybody does, which is done to death in Hindi films and South films, and everywhere is the same
Yep.
thing. After some time, one does feel bad. We have done
Mhm.
disservice to Chinese culture in many ways, and it's such a rich culture just like ours. But you're probably the only Indian right now who's looking at peace. So, or at least openly looking for peace. Honestly, tell us, the two countries have a lot more in common. You actually think we could get along, right?
Yes, actually, this is a new project that I'm working on with two of my friends, Salmya Ashok and Rhea Luo. And what we're trying to do is find stories of China in India which exist. There are like, you won't honestly think about it, but wherever I go, I think because people, whenever they hear that I'm working on China, they'll be like, oh, like my father does this business where he exports cocoa peat to China, or like I have an uncle who does this, or oh, I know someone who runs this restaurant that does these things. And so I find like stories of China that crop up in India every single day, and it's very very interesting for me. So we're thinking of doing a new
And
podcast
I've been
on
told
that.
that the martial arts itself comes from India actually, and was taken from here. Uh,
So I think on one hand, we like to think that everything comes from India,
Chess, yeah,
right? But there is like this legend about like the first Shaolin monk came from India
that's
and then he
exactly.
trained people. I don't think anyone thinks of like Kung
But
Fu
there's a
as
name. There's
Indian.
an Indian name. I think it's a Tamil name, if I'm not mistaken. Right outside the monastery, one of the famous monasteries
I
of
think you're
Shaolin.
thinking of like Bodhidharma. But
That would be to do with the Buddha. I'm saying there's a name, a very Indian sounding name, which are
yeah.
maybe we're wrong, which is there, and they
Mm-hmm.
preserve the name, and they there's a lot of respect for that origin, the pioneer.
Possibly. I'm not too sure of it, to
See,
be
I lie about a
honest.
lot of things, and I probably am lying about this, but this I got from somebody else. But we'll research it. Maybe someone who's watching will
Hmm.
be able to clear this up. But
Hmm.
no, I just like the fact that sometimes we, like you said, we just decide that this is ours and this is theirs, when actually it's ours. We never think it's ours. Did chess come from Iran? Did it come from India? It's not 100% clear. There are two schools of thought. Same with many other things. Gunpowder came from there, but there's also people who say that in the Vedas we already invented things which blow up and all that. So I don't know. I'm just saying maybe sometimes you should think it's more like a global thing anyway.
Yeah, I agree. It's like how like what we think of Indian food now isn't really Indian food, right? Like it comes from a lot of ingredients in Latin America. And so
Yeah,
it's not
spice.
really Indian food. Yeah, like Indian food, what we know is what 300, 400 years old in that sense. It's yeah,
What about the names? I mean, Hamsini should be okay, but what about Tanya, Sonia? I grew up and suddenly people told me those are not Indian names. I said, what the hell? We've been robbing people left, right, and center. Okay, let's get back to a very interesting part of your life, because we have to go
Mhm,
into a break quickly. Is that you also went to, or rather, you attended international forums in USA, Poland, Australia, Indonesia, amongst others. What
mhm,
what, what was that? Who are these people? You are intellectuals who believe the world is like we are discussing a global place, and
mhm.
it's a very positive thinker sort of place for philosophers who have very positive attitude.
Well, not. I mean, it's a number of academic conferences. The way I travel is because I'm young, poor student. I don't really have the money to travel internationally. So what I would do is apply for a lot of opportunities that would take me abroad. So a lot of them are exchanges, a lot of them are fellowships, a lot of them are conferences. Yeah, a lot of them are mostly very
Hamsini,
intellectual.
it's very simple. If it's a budget issue, I'll solve it for you. Just say you're pro-China, China will pay for it, or say you're anti-China and India will pay for it. It's open. There's no issue there.
Yes,
But I
that's
just
true.
want to, in a nutshell, what happens when you guys sit around in
Hmm.
places like Australia, Indonesia, whatever, and it's a
Hmm.
mixed group, I presume. You
Hmm.
mentioned certain people of different colors and all, which I won't get into. So what happens? Just give us an idea.
So I think most of these conferences or whatever are exchanges of ideas, right? So they bring together people from all over the world or from a particular region. You sit, you either talk about a topic or at hand, or you do a project together, and you brainstorm ideas, and it opens you up to not only the way you do things but also looking at things from a completely different point of view. Maybe you won't have thought that like places in Africa or countries in Latin America, and there are people there who are doing the same things that you do and who want to sort of affect change the way you do. So I think that these spaces opened up to sort of bring people together and to expose ourselves to different views of the world. And I think they've been very helpful that way.
So I'll ask this question then. Do you think globalism and nationalism can coexist?
Yes, I think you can be a very proud of your country and still be very happy to learn from what the rest of the world has to offer you. I don't see them not existing.
Okay, so here we come to the slightly. I asked this offline again, but it's something that really bothers me a little bit when the whole Rihanna, of course, because she's a superstar, blew up, went about the farmers' agitation and showed support from outside, and all our big celebrities turned up and said, "Please don't discuss our business. Is our business. It's not your
Mhm,
business. Buzz off." But when it comes to China, everybody wants to critique it all the time. Whether it's the
mhm,
West, we are like the West of Asia. Let's face it, and so policies are almost the same most of the time, and it's always China bashing. So,
mhm.
don't you think there's a bit of hypocrisy there that we don't want anyone to look inwards to India, but we are like to talk about Pakistan and China? And I'm not
Mhm.
saying this as supporters of these countries. Do I do like the fast bowlers from Pakistan? Anyway,
Yeah, I
what do
think
you say?
I agree with you. I think we're very quick to reject anyone having an opinion on what's happening in India, whereas we're really quick to point out other people's faults, right? Like, I'm not saying what China is doing is right, but we are very happy to discuss what's happening in Xinjiang, what's happening in Tibet, what's happening in Hong Kong. But the second someone says, hey, what's happening in Kashmir, what's happening in the Northeast, what's happening with caste or farmers or anything, we're immediately like, hey, this is our country, how dare you come and talk to us about things that are essential to our national sovereignty.
I like the accent. You just went into I think a North Indian accent of some sort. I can see
You can see
way
my
of your
bias.
finger pointing. Yes, finger pointing. This is traditional Chennai pointing fingers up north, and that even sounds like a gali up north.
Up north.
Right, excellent. Yeah, so before we conclude this first part and go into a break, just a quick word about. See, we've been sort of pro China because I know that's your thing and all that. Not that you're pro China, but I just have to give a balanced view. I hope, but
Mhm,
when it comes to territorial expansion, when you go back to
mhm.
62 or whenever, then they are to blame. Are they not to blame? I mean, if you have to call a spade, do they not have expansionist tendencies? And don't they do it all on a weekly basis almost, where they just take a few meters here and there?
So I think were they initially to blame for the 1962 crisis and are they to blame now are two separate questions.
Hmm.
So one is that is China expanding and are there border incursions every day? Yes. But is this purely China's fault? I would say I think it takes two hands to clap. I think like the root of the problem is still the same, right? Like if you think about it, in 1962, what essentially happened was India was saying, let's decide at every point which land is yours and which land is ours. Whereas China wanted like a quid pro quo. So they said, we'll swap you for the East what we want in the West, which India was like, absolutely not. So I think there's a huge difference of perspective, and we've never
So
gotten over that.
it could have been sorted out in 62 itself if we had come to
Yeah.
the table and sort of worked out some middle line. Hate to use that terrible pun. Uh, but I wish you had said that all in Mandarin for safety. So
Oh,
especially
God.
when you said two hands to clap thing and all that, because, oof, ouch, that's scary. You're on your own now, Miss Hariharan. We can't help you. You have to be careful. Make sure make sure, I don't know, AI DMK wins. I don't know what's going to happen in Tamil Nadu, but center is coming from what I gather.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so we're going to a break, but can you do it for us in Mandarin? How do you say? This is like a good test because I think it's an
Oh,
odd
God.
line. We're going for a little interval break. How would you say that? And we'll be back.
我们现在呃，哦，我们现在 Oman, Huelala, we're going to come back.
Okay. And that tone was, if you didn't use it for break, it would mean what?
I have no clue. I did not realize this was a Mandarin quizzing
Because if you've
show now.
insulted any great leader's mother or father with this inflection change, please tell me now. We just want
I'm
to
sure I
distance
have.
ourselves. Ours is a very cowardly podcast. In fact, I'm going to change it to a Darpok podcast. I think that makes more sense. So we're taking a break. More with Hamsini when we come back. Hopefully, lots of questions. She's an expert on Indo-Chinese affairs and world affairs in general. She's a young mind, but going in the right direction. Perhaps not so loved in certain parts of the world, but definitely, hopefully, a person who will help the globe come together in a small way. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
All right. Chinese for break. And we're back. We're back. Silvery is joining us as we speak. Hamsini is
Hi,
still
good
here.
morning.
Hey, good morning.
Silvery, you've been to China, right?
No, I haven't.
But you've been to China Valley for food. I've seen you there.
I have. Absolutely.
There you
You
go.
know China Valley in Powai? The restaurant?
China Valley is everywhere.
I mean, China Valley is everywhere.
What's
correct.
wrong with you, bro?
I just thought
The
you know the
Chinese are
particular
coming.
one I go to.
Yeah, no. Yeah. You're very touchy about Powai. You don't want to share.
No, I do.
I was shooting something there. I tried to call you, you didn't take the phone. And then you called me on the drive back. And it was all in a pub.
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to avoid you, Cyrus.
You were, and rightly so. After hearing the first half of the podcast, definitely so. But we have with us someone who is taking on many governments as we speak,
Yes.
Hamsini. Trying to give a more balanced view about what I think we're just too emotive as Indians now all the time. We react too emotionally. It's okay during a cricket match, but otherwise, I think we need to tone it down. Do we have AMA questions, or would you like to ask her anything?
No, we have tons of very interesting AMAs.
Okay, Hamsini, now this is not from us. Huh? This is voices. We're not doctoring it or whatever. So whatever you hear, you hear.
I think also some of Hamsini's friends and family are joining us on the chat. Because they're like, my girl's killing it. Hannah Sudhakar says, my girl's killing it. Gunjan Menon is, wow, Hamsini, big fan of States of Anarchy. You're awesome. Well done. Sumathi Hariharan is so proud of my girl. Proud of you, my girl. So thank you so much for joining us, guys. We have a few very interesting AMAs about foreign policy for Hamsini. But before that, there's one for Cyrus. This one is from Mayur Yeole. He says, love Cyrus and even more what he says. And love even more what he says. My question to Cyrus is, when will Corona go away? And what color underwear is Cyrus wearing today?
Okay, I'll be honest. I've started, because I just don't like washing clothes. Not that I do it myself. I just wear the underwear the reverse way on day 2. It's an old practice, not Chinese or Indian. As far as I know, the Harappa civilization talked about it, but there is no proof yet that people have done it before. But for what is it's green and gray stripes. I mean, you look like a prisoner in Yerawada or something if you wear it and nothing else. But what was the other part of this question?
The underwear and
No,
when will
COVID.
Corona go away?
Yeah, so I'll give you a date. It'll be May 7th at 11:30 Wednesday. Maybe 11:35, but definitely 11:35. So you can hold me to it. What kind of question is that, bro? How are we going to answer it? For me, after 3 days of that lockdown in March last year, I said enough. And I declared it over. And I wandered around maskless. And I taunted and teased the police and BMC officials. I've learned many ways to irritate them. One is to never carry money, so they can't find you because nobody takes you in and spends half a day with you. So that's my gift to India. Go ahead. Never carry money on you and you'll be safe. Yeah.
Do you not wear masks at all? In and out?
No, I wear it when people are around because you have to, but I don't see the point of it. I don't know after I've been everywhere. I've shot at Amazon with Netflix. We are normal shoot. I've been out of the country. I've been out of the cities. So I just give up after some time because there's so many people around. What are you going to do? I think it's just a test of immunity after some time, nothing else. So the only thing is you don't want to give someone else so that you don't feel bad. I don't actually feel bad, but you want to pretend you don't feel bad. So in that sense, if people are passing, I keep it on my hand a lot. I like it. It feels like a forearm guard when you're batting. So I just rip it off when someone's coming and put it on quickly. Yeah. The other thing is carry a mask with one torn. Then you can just show the guy, look, abhi toot gaya, main kya karega? That kind of thing. The helplessness, the majburi, as we say in Hindi, that is very important. I have that face. I always look helpless.
Yeah.
So it normally works.
This is some great jugaad
Hamsini
to not wear
impressed
mask.
because she's from China, where you make one step wrong, you're fined 100 yen. And then after that, you're
never heard of from again.
And then are you? Yes, yeah.
No, actually, very.
Is that true?
No, mask wearing is more like a social phenomenon where, like, if you wear a mask, it shows that you care about the community around you.
Yeah, exactly.
Cyrus, you don't care about the
I
community
don't.
around you.
I've never liked human beings. I don't know if you've studied Thomas Hobbes, but I believe his lines about selfish, egoistic, cruel, and acquisitive. That's the male of the world. So what is good in that? Tell me. Selfish, egoistic,
Nasty shot.
exactly all that. I'm going to get into the physical side of that. Offline, you've already attacked two races. That leaves us with just one or two. So I'm very worried, really. But we didn't share
All right,
that with our listeners. Thank God.
let's get to the AMAs.
Yeah.
The first one for Hamsini comes in from Madhu Mahadevan. He says, very interesting experiences, Hamsini. Thanks for sharing. Could you talk to us a little about the leftover women in China?
The
Sure.
what?
Leftover
Leftover
women. So I
women.
think it's a phrase used for single women who are in like their 30s or 20s, something like
It's called
30s.
leftover women.
30s.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
So
very
ways in which China and India
terrible
are
term.
similar, Cyrus, are
My friend Kunal is 55 without a woman for the last 20 years. What do we call him? Oh, gay, which is okay. It's acceptable. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. Hamsini, what is this phrase?
yeah. So leftover women are women who are 30 and not married, and so they're considered leftover by society.
Ouch.
Yeah,
How?
and this is mostly because women work a lot and they have higher education, they're not willing to sort of settle for less, and so you have fewer men who sort of can match up to that. China and India are very similar in that
Oh,
you have a lot
they'll
of men.
overachieve because of overachieving. They can't get the right level.
Yeah.
What a ridiculous situation to be in.
Yeah, but what's funny is that on the other end of the spectrum, you also have like a huge number of men who are like farmers or who are in rural areas, who are not educated, who aren't able to find women because a lot of the women have moved on,
But they're
right?
called nobody cares. So there's
Yeah.
leftover women and nobody cares. Men.
Yeah.
Okay, got
So
it. Got
then
it.
you have like a phenomenon of like these men like marrying women from Pakistan or Southeast Asia.
Why
Yeah,
Pakistan and Southeast Asia?
because like smaller, less well-off countries.
But aren't they
It's
a
a
little bit? Is this a fair thing that they're a little anti-Islamic with the eager population being, from what we gather from the outside, being hurt at the very least?
Yeah, I don't know how it works, to be honest. I've only read about this, but I have read that there are like a lot of women from Pakistan, at least. There is a backlash in Pakistan, but because their governments are so close, the backlash isn't often reported in
Well,
the
how will they
news.
be if they're close with Pakistan? Then
Mhm.
won't that always be a problem for us? Sorry to interrupt the AMA.
No
In the
worries.
sense that they have such a strong alliance that we're always like
Mhm.
playing third party.
I think it's because we're so suspicious of anyone who Pakistan is friendly with. During the Cold War, Pakistan was friendly with the US and we were immediately estranged, right? I think if we just stopped focusing on Pakistan in our foreign policy, then we'd have a better foreign policy.
Wow. It takes a 20-something young girl who travels to Beijing and back to tell us all that. Foreign policy makers, are you listening? Obviously, not to our podcast. We can say what we want. Mr. Rao, are you there? Silvery, go on.
Okay. Next one. It comes in from Mahendra. He says, Hamsini, does China have internalized racism like India? What about economic class differentiation as well? Is it palpable?
We sort of
Yeah.
asked her, yeah.
Yeah, China definitely has internalized racism. There's a lot about like having fair skin,
Oh, God.
looking very Korean is in these days. But I think there is a huge backlash against people who are darker in that sense.
So same as everywhere else.
Same as everywhere else. And the second part of that question was economic class differences, was it?
Yeah, the same. I mean, sort
Yeah.
of touched on it before, but
So I remember once when I was traveling, one of my Chinese friends, we were in a small village, and she was like, "Look at this peasant wallpaper," and I was like, "Peasant wallpaper? Kya hota hai? Like, what is peasant wallpaper?" And she was like, "No, it's like very rural," and I like it's not something that I would have ever thought of, but there is a
Then,
very big.
but we say the same thing. We look at things as like I remember Palm Beach Road. My wife saying it's such a down market, architecture and colors and all. There, my wife and friend Kunal are artists, so they have these strange conversations. But it was a class divide,
Mhm.
artistic aesthetic, if you like. So isn't that also just like racism there?
Yeah, I mean, I think class divides happen everywhere, and China grew really quickly over 3 decades, but they also grew very unequally. So, like, they declared that they eliminated absolute poverty this year, but there are still a lot of people who are very low down in the chain, who don't have like a college education or
No
jobs in that
poverty.
sense.
Silvery, we have to move to China. Stand-up comedians will be fed
That's true.
and may not be jailed.
Yeah.
It's a point to note.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go on. You were saying.
No, I think if you're a stand-up comedian in China, there's a very huge chance of you being jailed if you're saying something against the government.
No, but you have to make jokes on the other countries. No, my point is you're not stupid.
Mhm.
Like you've got to figure out the market. Market dictates. All right. I will not
Okay.
interrupt. Go on, sir.
No, it's-
Is that it? You're done?
Yeah.
You're
Okay.
not paying attention, Silvery. Otherwise, you'll know
No,
when
no.
she's done.
I was.
You're watching something,
Start
aren't you?
talking.
Is it
Yes.
some erotic Chinese film?
Yeah, that's it. Correct.
Remember, snake in the monkey shadow is not a metaphor for sex. Huh.
Okay.
Go on.
Cool. Next one comes in from Manaswini Hariharan.
Mhm.
Hi, Manaswini.
Is that a relative, you think?
That's my sister.
Yeah, makes sense.
Hamsini, Manaswini, you see.
Why can't she just text you later?
I don't know.
All right.
Manaswini asks, after COVID-19, there are even more unfavorable views on China. What's China doing to address this narrative?
That is true. That's a huge PR bashing, is it not?
It is a huge PR bashing. And a lot of countries, that's why they call it like the China virus or the Wuhan virus.
Donald
And
Trump, the great humanitarian.
yes, of course, the great humanitarian. And I think what China is doing on one hand is like sending vaccines to countries across the world. Like vaccine diplomacy is a huge thing. They're doing it on a much bigger scale than what India is doing right now. And also because they
In
had
a
to
sense,
test.
they should feel guilty. Hamsini, I mean, if it originated in India, then the buck would stop with us to an extent. Yes or no?
True. But I think that like they have taken it very deeply because of like the number of like hate crimes against like Asian Americans and Chinese
Yeah.
people in particular across the world has been really bad. I was actually reading a study about like how a lot of Asian Americans are afraid to go to school, and so the like the enrollment rate slightly dipped this year.
I can imagine a little sledging and all will 100% happen.
Particularly in India, right? Like anyone who looks slightly from the Northeast also gets like reviled and like
So
apart
much to
from
be
normal
proud of in this
discrimination.
country. Yeah.
So much, right? So I think like vaccine diplomacy is something that they're definitely doing. The other thing is that they're trying to counter this narrative that like China was at fault for this, and this is contentious, but they're trying to say, oh, this could have originated anywhere, right? It's a zoonotic virus and this happens not here. Or there's another, like the more extreme version of that is to say that like an American lab developed this virus and then
We
they
heard all
sneaked it
those
into
counter
China.
theories and conspiracy, counter conspiracy. But at the end of the day, what do you think? Do you think that there was some engineering going on, or do you think it's an organic, natural situation with bats?
I don't know about with bats, but I think that wet markets have been problematic and they haven't been regulated at all. So it is very highly possible that it originated there because that's how SARS also originated. But what I also believe, honestly, is that it doesn't matter where it originated. It doesn't matter where Zika or Ebola or Nipah
There's no point
originated.
finger pointing.
Yeah, it doesn't take us anywhere.
True. Silverman?
Yes, sir. Next one comes in from
Yeah.
Aditya Prabhakar. This was Cyrus. He says, hi, Cyrus. I grew my hair over the past year, and now my hair is wavier, thicker, and shinier than my wife's. She was very vocal about cutting my hair initially, but now doesn't say anything. What should I do?
No. I remember on Loveline, we got a similar question. It sounds flippant and silly, but you know, when you enter the territory of another person, you got to be a little careful, especially when you're living together, because you're invading the space which is theirs. There is again the possession, acquisitive nature of the person. But the truth is, we are like that. I would not go. My wife is not very into beauty products. She's naturally beautiful. Hold for camera. But I would not decide which shampoos and conditioners and all to buy and make a fool of myself and try to be competitive about it. I think you're asking for trouble. Also, generally, no matter how shiny his hair is, will he really beat a woman's shock of hair? I mean, over a period of time, difficult to see. But if he does, I think he's asking for trouble. Better to have an affair. You can say sorry and move on. But what are you going to do? The pictures will stay forever of the hair. You looking better in the family pictures. You looking better in the holiday. You looking more beautiful, with the fan blowing your hair, and hers like, she's behind the fan because you've kept her there for the picture. I think it may sound flip, but I do think that you got to be careful of where like I'll tell you one thing. I'm very possessive about my dogs, for example. I don't like people walking my dogs. It irritates me if a helper walks the dog or somebody else walks the dog. I don't even like the family members growing up. I used to get irritated by that. So I think we are strange that way. You need to respect the space of the spouse. I would say you live in China, she lives in India. Perfect relationship. But Hamsini, you're not married, right?
No.
Would you marry a Chinese gentleman? Or is it possible?
Yes, if he asked.
That's all
There
it
is no
takes.
he.
That's all it takes.
Oh my
Ask
God!
her.
Hamsini, your relatives are going to be online for the next half an hour.
Yes, be ready to be flooded by
What
please
the
don't
hell?
marry.
If he asks, that's all it. I mean, come on, some standards, yeah. Look at your intellectual property is a lot. You can't throw it away.
True, but like look at the standards that I have for Indian men. Therefore, need
So will you
to.
be called back to Chennai to look at a prospective double MBA, IT
Oh, that's already
superstar?
happening. Please,
Oh
please,
boy.
that's already happening.
But with your love for China, the fact is, it looks like you will have one leg in each world, right?
Yes,
And at least for the next few years, and maybe more. A man will have to adjust to that.
obviously, because if a man was living in China, I won't get the question. No.
Yeah, there's really a God. This world has not progressed at all, honestly. Sorry, Selvi, do you have time? Can we do one more?
Yeah, we can do. We got a couple of great ones I think we should get to. Abhig Ghosh asks, Abhig Ghosh, he asks, hello Hamsini, hope you've gotten used to Baidu. Maybe this is controversial, but can you talk about Taiwan openly, for example, with your Chinese friends? Or
Great
are you
question.
skeptical about this?
What a
So,
question.
That's actually very interesting. I think with like really close Chinese friends, I'm happy to talk politics with, and they're happy to talk politics with. But unlike India, where we're all very happy to scream out our political opinions into a void or on shows, most Chinese people are very reticent to discuss politics, particularly with people who don't know them too well, right? Because they have a real stake in what's happening and could be
Would there
penalized.
be some sympathy for Taiwan's independence and, I mean, the fact that they punch above their weight and they're standing there alone?
Amongst certain pockets of people, yes, I think there is sort of understanding, but I think around the majority of people, I would say no. I think that Taiwan is still seen as sort of like a historical, how we
We
see
we
Pakistan
better
occupied
not.
Kashmir,
Yeah,
for example.
we better not point fingers. Let's stay out of this one. Yeah, fair enough. Silvery, last
Yeah,
one. Come on.
next one comes in from Madhu Mahadevan. He already asked one question before, but this is the second one from him. He says, what are your thoughts about the Chinese government surveilling their citizens? For example, this feels like the government is encroaching on free will, almost like Black Mirror. When you were in China, do you think China has a profile on you? And does that concern you?
Oh, China definitely has a profile on me. I think like I already have like WeChat and Alibaba and a bunch
But
of apps.
but
So
you're a good advert for China. I mean,
That's
you're
true.
very positive about the country. You're not very critical at all.
yeah, I mean, I'm not critical on this show because we're talking very like superficially, but I think like if
Oh,
we got
mean.
into like, no,
No,
not like in that
that's a
sense, but I
slap
mean,
on
like
our
we don't
Silvery.
have,
Let's walk out.
no, I mean, in the sense that we don't have like the time to get into like nuanced discussion about like what China is doing in all of its different places, right? Like there are lots of things that I don't agree with with regards to the Chinese
No, you
government.
can say that, but the fact of the matter is you're walking the walk. You've
Hmm.
gone to China, you're learning the language, you're
Hmm.
imbibing the culture, and
Hmm.
by and large, you're enjoying the experience. Of
Yeah.
being a critic is just because you're basically a democratic person at heart, so you want to look at things differently. But I would think if I was Chinese government, you're a great ambassador for me. I can't see why
I
not.
hope the Chinese government is listening. I'm a great ambassador. Please pay me
But you
money.
are. This has been such a nice podcast in the sense that without screaming and shouting. Of course, ever since I wore spectacles, I expect everyone come on the panel and scream. But no, I think this kind of balanced conversation when you talk about China or Pakistan or anything else would help a lot if people just kept it there. Of course, as you said, we haven't gone in depth. We don't have the profundity to do that or the time.
No, I think we have the profundity. I don't think we have the time, to be
Yeah,
honest.
no, I'm just
But I
kidding.
think that
I've been called much worse than simpleton is easy. It's cool. Yeah.
no, I
Sorry.
think the Chinese government would prefer someone who still like took their line on a lot more things than I do,
No,
and I
that's
don't
too
take a
much.
line
Huh?
on
You
most
can't be
things.
brainwashed completely because no one's going to buy it. I
Yeah.
think you're perfect. If I was them, the fact that you're right in the middle there and you're saying, okay, I like this and I don't like that. But the fact that you are there tells the story. That means that you actually enjoy the culture.
Yes, I really do. And I think like so they definitely do have a file on me. Whether or not they choose to offer me a job in question is a different thing.
Just be careful then about which vaccine they give you. Because they'll say vaccine, vaccine, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And next thing we know, you've got a beard and, you're working there
Yeah.
with the uniform. But
Yeah.
by the way, that whole one child thing worked well for them. But is
In
it still
certain
there? It's not
aspects.
there.
It's not there anymore. But there are a lot of women, particularly, who talk about, hey, wonderful that you don't want you want us to now have more than one child. Who is going to take care of this extra child? Because cannot be me. It's a lot of work for women, right? Like if you have more than one child.
Is Jinping liked? What would you say?
I think so. I think a lot of people really like him as a leader, and he's very similar to Modi ji.
Oh, okay, all right. Alpha male kind of thing. I get that. That seems to be, especially during COVID or whatever, people want a strong force.
Yeah.
They don't care so much about their democratic rights for some reason. I'm the only one who's fighting about masks and told to go inside and outside, curfew and curfew. Anyway, all right. Silvery, is that a wrap up or is there some last one?
We have one which has just come in, which is pretty good, I think.
Okay.
This one comes in from Rohit Pillai. He says, "What are your thoughts on China not having an open media or not sharing information with other countries, especially with the whole coronavirus numbers thing?"
Yeah, I think that's pretty terrible. I think China does really badly
After
on
such a
transparency.
nice tribute. Go on.
No, I think like China does really badly on transparency. And I think the reason that they do that is that they're afraid that they're going to get even more blame if sort of like numbers and things come up. And I think that's a
So they're
inherent
lying?
problem. Are they lying? I don't know, honestly.
Or they're not telling you everything.
They're not
rather
telling
than
you
lie.
everything, I think is fair. So for example, one of the things that I think like the New York Times or one of these newspapers did last year is that you got like an official death count from Wuhan, right? Which was I think like 3,000, 5,000 people. And then after like the lockdown was lifted, one of these reporters went to all the mortuaries in the city and she saw lines of people like standing to get urns. And so she calculated that the number of urns after the lockdown lifted was 10 times that number. So it's a good proxy to tell you how many people actually died during that time, right? So we don't know what the numbers are. I mean, now things are much better. China's mostly back to normal. But at the peak of it, we don't know what the numbers are. And I don't think we will.
When will you go back then if things are better?
If things are better, if flights resume, then the second things get better. But I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
People listening, that's basically because I think Hamsini is worried that they'll marry her off here. We've got our own China in Chennai going on, where, if she doesn't go back, she'll lose her independence. So we have to be a little careful. We don't want to be party to that. But I think honestly, it's been a great podcast. I'm not trying to, just fakely praise you by any means. I just think you have a wonderful life. So interesting. And who does that? You come from, urban India and then you go to China and you explore it and then, want to stay with it. What do you think, Silvery? Look at your life and mine. It's with due respect. What do we do?
Nothing. Yeah, I know.
I mean,
I feel very like such an underachiever.
Yeah. I mean, you've not even gone back to Punjab. Forget China. What kind of guy are you?
Yeah. I could have left my stuff in Punjab this entire lockdown, but I didn't.
You could have.
An idiot.
Really? Think properly, brother. Think properly.
No,
Okay.
Thank you, Cyrus. I had a lot of fun. This was
Yeah.
very enjoyable.
Okay, you can bitch about us later. We don't mind. And just speak in Mandarin. What do we know? Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, one last question. Do they speak any Hindi or Tamil or do you think they pick up our languages?
I
That's the
actually
best
have
way
a
to
friend in
infiltrate us.
Bangalore who's learning Tamil. Yeah. So, and I know like some students in pockets who are learning like Hindi and Tamil. But yeah, I know.
Because there's this great fear of China taking over from within, and that to do that you have to assimilate. So I don't know. I think it's all conspiracies, but sometimes you get a little worried. Not just India. I'm looking at the European countries as well, where those other people come from that you mentioned offline.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think very few people though. Like I think there are a lot of people who are still learning English, but very few.
So these
learning.
conspiracy theories are all nonsense. as far
All
as you're concerned.
nonsense. Stop reading WhatsApp things, Cyrus.
Last question. Favorite Chinese dish?
I have so many. Jianbing. Jianbing is this like wrap thing. And it's made like a dosa, but with like a different eggish batter. And then they put like veggies and meat and like a cracker that's super crispy. And then you like eat it like a roll. It's amazing. And I'm craving it so much. And I haven't found a single restaurant in India that has it.
So it's almost like a dosa with thicker sort of
Think of it like a roll. Like it's like a roll. It's really, really nice. It's called a jianbing.
Champagne. I thought it was a premier, but now he's a roll. Fair enough. Okay, listen, this has been great. Thank you so much. I'm booking my ticket to Beijing the moment this COVID thing lifts. And hopefully you'll be there and you'll help us see the sights from a neutral eye.
Yes, that is the point of the show. Thanks, Cyrus.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Have a good one.